My name is Morgan Reynolds, and at 32 years old, I've been the proud owner of Vista del Mar, a luxury resort in Malibu, for 3 years now. But it wasn't always champagne wishes and caviar dreams. Just 5 years ago, my mother Catherine looked around this very resort and told me with that dismissive tone of hers, "This place is beautiful but clearly above your class, dear. Know your limits." That comment was just one in a lifetime of being told I wasn't good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough. Last month, I finally hosted a family reunion here at Vista del Mar. The kicker? My mother had absolutely no idea she was staying at her daughter's resort. Before I tell you how I pulled off the ultimate surprise for my family, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And hit that subscribe button if you love a good revenge success story. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Portland, Oregon, where our family home was modest but comfortable. From my earliest memories, my mother Catherine was a woman obsessed with status and appearances, despite our decidedly average financial situation. She was emotionally distant, her affection seemingly conditional on achievements that would impress the neighbors or her country club friends. "Morgan, look at your cousin Elizabeth's piano recital dress. Isn't it beautiful?" "Her mother knows how to present a child properly," she'd say, completely ignoring the fact that I had just placed first in my age group at the recital. Comments like these were the soundtrack of my childhood. My father, Robert, was kind but passive. He'd give me supportive smiles and private words of encouragement, but he never stood up to my mother when she tore into my self-esteem. "Your mother just wants what's best for you," he'd explain after particularly harsh criticisms. "She grew up with nothing and doesn't want the same for you." When I was 10, I won a regional science competition with a project on sustainable energy. Instead of celebrating my achievement, my mother fixated on my appearance. "Couldn't you have worn the blue dress I bought you instead of those bargain store pants?" The Sullivan's daughter looked so put together with her hair properly styled. The trophy I was so proud of was relegated to my bedroom shelf, deemed not impressive enough for the living room display cabinet that housed my sister's ballet participation certificates. My younger sister Audrey was the golden child. 2 years my junior, she followed our mother's playbook to the letter. Ballet, violin, French lessons, everything our mother deemed appropriate for a young lady of quality. I didn't resent Audrey. She was playing the game as best she could. But watching her receive the praise and affection I craved made the contrast in our treatment all the more painful. By middle school, I had developed an interest in business. I started selling handmade bracelets to classmates and even set up a small weekend lemonade stand that turned surprisingly profitable for a 12-year-old. My mother dismissed these endeavors as common. "Morgan, why can't you focus on something more refined? Business is so transactional. Wouldn't you rather take up painting or perhaps consider nursing? Teaching would also be suitable." The underlying message was clear. Aim for traditionally feminine careers that wouldn't challenge the social hierarchy she desperately wanted to climb. High school brought more of the same. While my friends' parents celebrated academic achievements and extracurricular successes, my mother's praise remained elusive. I joined the entrepreneurship club and the debate team, finding my voice and confidence outside our home. I started working part-time at 16, first at a local coffee shop and later at a small boutique hotel as a weekend receptionist. These jobs fascinated me. I loved watching how businesses operated from the inside. "Menial jobs," my mother called them. "You're serving people when you should be focusing on becoming someone who is served." My senior year of high school was a turning point. I applied for colleges with strong business programs, against my mother's wishes that I pursue education or healthcare. When I received a substantial business scholarship to a well-regarded state university, I was ecstatic. At graduation, as families gathered to celebrate, my mother spent most of her time pointing out my cousins who were heading to Ivy League schools. "Bradley got into Dartmouth, you know. Full family legacy. That's the kind of education that opens doors," she said to her friends, within my earshot. The fact that Bradley's parents had paid his way while I had earned a merit scholarship didn't seem to factor into her assessment. The day I left for college was liberating. Packing my modest wardrobe and second-hand laptop into my father's station wagon, I made a silent promise to myself. I would build something that even my mother couldn't diminish. I didn't yet know what form that would take, but the seed of determination had been planted. As Portland faded in the rearview mirror, I felt like I could finally breathe. College was everything I hoped it would be: challenging, eye-opening, and most importantly, free from my mother's constant judgment. I double majored in business administration and hospitality management, fascinated by the intersection of service, property management, and finance. While other students spent weekends at parties, I juggled 3 part-time jobs: morning shifts at a campus cafe, weekend reception work at a local inn, and evenings doing bookkeeping for a small restaurant. My schedule was grueling, but I was building something: valuable experience and a savings account that was entirely my own. Despite the workload, I maintained a 4 gigapascals, often studying late into the night after shifts. My roommate Jessica would find me asleep on my textbooks and gently nudge me toward my bed. "Morgan, you're going to work yourself to death before graduation," she'd warn. But I was driven by something deeper than just good grades. Every A on a business strategy paper, every positive comment from a hotel guest, every extra dollar in my savings account was proof that I was capable: evidence I could one day present to counter my mother's dismissal of my abilities. During my junior year, I landed an internship at the Lakeside Hotel, a mid-tier property catering to business travelers. I started in housekeeping, wanting to understand the operation from the ground up. My supervisor, Linda, was initially skeptical of the college girl who wanted to clean rooms, but she quickly recognized my work ethic. "Most management trainees want to skip this part," she told me one day as we turned over a suite together. "But you can't manage what you don't understand." I moved through departments: housekeeping to maintenance to front desk to food and beverage, absorbing everything I could about hotel operations. By senior year, I had a comprehensive understanding of how each department contributed to the guest experience and the bottom line. Graduation day arrived with a sense of triumph. I had honors cords draped over my gown and job offers from 2 respectable hotel chains. My father beamed with pride. My mother's response was predictably lukewarm. "Well, I suppose hospitality is practical enough," she said, examining my diploma. "Though I always hoped you'd pursue something more prestigious." I accepted a position with Meridian Hotels as an assistant manager at their Portland property. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but the management training program had a solid reputation. I threw myself into the role, working long hours and volunteering for the shifts and tasks no one else wanted. Holiday weekends? I was there. Problem guests? Send them my way. System overhauls? I'd learn the software inside out. After 6 months, I noticed our property was hemorrhaging money on vendor contracts. I spent weeks analyzing spending patterns and researching alternatives, eventually creating a comprehensive proposal that would save the hotel nearly $200,000 annually without compromising quality. I proudly presented my findings to my manager, Trevor, expecting recognition for my initiative. 3 weeks later, Trevor presented his cost-saving strategy to regional directors, implementing my plan without so much as a footnote acknowledging my work. When the regional VP commended him for his innovation, Trevor accepted the praise without hesitation. I was devastated, but not entirely surprised. It wasn't the first time my ideas had been appropriated by someone higher up the ladder. When a supervisory position opened up, I applied confidently, certain my performance would speak for itself. Trevor hired an external candidate instead, Mark, a former fraternity brother of his with half my experience. When I asked for feedback on why I'd been passed over, Trevor's response was vague and condescending. "You're doing great where you are, Morgan. Some people are just better suited for leadership, you know? Maybe give it another year or 2. I questioned whether I had chosen the right path. All those nights studying, the double shifts, the missed social opportunities, had they been for nothing? I called my father in a moment of doubt. "Princess," he said, using his old nickname for me. "Sometimes the road gets rocky to make sure you really want to reach the destination." Despite his encouragement, I was considering a career change when fate intervened in the form of William Baker. A 60-something investor with silver hair and sharp eyes, Baker was touring our property as part of a potential acquisition group. When a pipe burst during his stay, flooding part of the executive suite, I handled the crisis efficiently, upgrading him to our presidential suite and arranging for his clothing to be dry cleaned overnight. The next morning, as I apologized again for the inconvenience, Baker handed me his business card. "Young lady, I've stayed in hotels across 6 continents, and I've rarely seen someone handle a crisis with such poise. My firm specializes in hospitality investment. We could use someone with your instincts. 2 weeks later, I accepted a junior position at Baker Investment Group, specializing in identifying and rehabilitating distressed hospitality properties. I gave notice at Meridian with no regrets, especially when Trevor had the audacity to seem surprised by my departure. "You're making a mistake," he warned. "The investment side is cutthroat. You don't have the killer instinct for it." I smiled politely and cleaned out my desk, his words adding fuel to the fire of my determination. My first day at Baker Investment Group was intimidating. The sleek downtown office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city was a far cry from the hotel back offices I was accustomed to. The other junior analysts were mostly men from prestigious business schools, dressed in tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I felt distinctly out of place in my department store, blazer, and sensible pumps. William Baker, however, didn't seem to notice or care about these superficial differences. He was interested in results, and he pushed us all relentlessly. 80-hour work weeks became my new normal. I analyzed property financials until the numbers blurred, researched market trends until dawn, and created detailed reports on potential acquisitions that left my fingers cramping from typing. "Real estate is just math and psychology," William often said. "Understand the numbers and understand human behavior, and you'll never make a bad investment." I absorbed his wisdom like a sponge, learning to look beyond surface impressions to see the true value and potential of a property. A tired-looking motel might have excellent bones and a prime location. A flashy resort could be hiding catastrophic debt and maintenance issues. I developed an eye for the difference. After 6 months of learning the ropes, I identified my first promising acquisition, a small airport hotel in Seattle with declining revenues but excellent underlying fundamentals. The current management was inept, the marketing non-existent, but the location was unbeatable and the building structurally sound. I spent weeks putting together a comprehensive analysis and proposed renovation budget. When I presented my findings to the investment committee, I faced skeptical looks from the senior partners. Only William seemed genuinely interested. After a grueling question session that felt more like an interrogation, the committee ultimately approved a modified version of my proposal. 6 months later, the Seattle property had been renovated, rebranded, and relaunched. Occupancy rates doubled, and revenue per available room increased by 60%. It wasn't a massive financial win for the firm, but it was profitable, and more importantly, it was my first tangible success in the investment world. William called me into his office after the quarterly numbers came in. "You've got good instincts, Morgan. Keep trusting them." As my confidence grew, so did my responsibilities. I began to specialize in identifying underperforming luxury and upscale properties that could be rehabilitated through better management and strategic upgrades. My analyses became more sophisticated, and my recommendations carried more weight with the investment committee. I finally felt I was building something meaningful, a reputation, a career path, financial security. I bought my first condo, a small but stylish one-bedroom in a desirable neighborhood. I began making modest personal investments on the side, following William's advice to always keep some skin in the game. When I flew home for Thanksgiving that year, I was eager to share my progress with my family. I had received a promotion to investment analyst and a substantial raise. My mother's response was predictable. "Investment analyst? Isn't that just a fancy title for someone who shuffles other people's money around? Your cousin Patricia just made partner at her law firm. You know, the familiar sting of her dismissal hadn't lessened with time or distance." I pushed my mashed potatoes around my plate while my sister Audrey, now a pediatric nurse as our mother had always wanted, received effusive praise for her career choice. Later that evening, I called William from my childhood bedroom, seeking perspective from someone who understood the world I was now part of. "Your mother's opinion is just that, an opinion," he said after I recounted the dinner conversation. "Success is the best revenge, but true wealth isn't just about proving someone wrong. It's about building something that has value, something that lasts." Over the next 2 years, I rose through the ranks at Baker Investment Group. I developed a reputation in the industry for my thorough due diligence and creative approach to property rehabilitation. I began to be invited to industry conferences and events, building a network of contacts throughout the hospitality world. I was also quietly building my own investment portfolio. Every bonus and commission went directly into carefully selected real estate shares and partnership opportunities. While my colleagues spent their earnings on luxury cars and designer wardrobes, I lived modestly and focused on growing my personal wealth. By my 27th birthday, I had been promoted to senior investment analyst, and my personal investment portfolio had grown significantly. On paper, I was more successful than I had ever dreamed possible when leaving Portland. But something was still missing. The acquisitions and turnarounds were intellectually satisfying, but I felt like a perpetual outsider, always analyzing other people's properties, never building something that was truly mine. And despite my professional accomplishments, my mother's approval remained elusive. During our increasingly infrequent phone calls, she would listen to my career updates with barely concealed indifference before changing the subject to Audrey's latest achievement or the accomplishments of various cousins and family friends. I began to wonder if I was still that little girl desperately seeking validation, just in a more expensive suit. The thought was uncomfortable, but it prompted an important realization. If I continued to measure my success by my mother's standards, I would never feel truly successful. I needed to build something for myself, something tangible that reflected my vision and values. I just didn't know what form that would take. But fate, as it often does, was about to show me the way forward. The family vacation wasn't my idea. In fact, I had tried to beg off, citing work commitments, but my father's gentle insistence wore me down. "Your mother has her heart set on having both her girls there," he said. Though we both knew it was more about appearances than sentiment. Catherine Reynolds wouldn't be able to boast about her perfect family holiday if half her offspring were missing. So there I was, at Vista del Mar in Malibu, a once legendary resort perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. The property was undeniably beautiful: Spanish colonial architecture, lush gardens, and breathtaking ocean views. But as someone who evaluated hotels professionally, I noticed the subtle signs of decline beneath the glossy surface. Slightly worn furnishings, understaffed apartments, menu items marked as unavailable that suggested supply chain issues. We were having breakfast on the terrace when my mother made the comment that would ultimately change the trajectory of my life. "This place is beautiful, but clearly above your class, dear. Know your limits." She said it casually, buttering her toast as if she hadn't just delivered another blow to my self-worth. The comment was prompted by my innocent observation that the property had potential for improvement. "I think with the right management and some strategic renovations, this place could be truly exceptional," I had said, my analyst's mind automatically assessing the property. My mother's dismissive response stung, but it also sparked something in me, a familiar determination that had fueled my academic and professional achievements. That afternoon, while my family lounged by the pool, I excused myself to make work calls, and instead began researching Vista del Mar's ownership and financial status. What I discovered was fascinating. The resort, once the crown jewel of a small luxury hotel group, had changed hands several times in recent years. Its current owners were a private equity firm with little hospitality experience, treating it as just another asset in a diversified portfolio. Occupancy rates had been declining steadily, and online reviews mentioned inconsistent service and dated amenities. The location and bones of the property were spectacular, but the execution was increasingly mediocre. Back in New York, I dug deeper. Vista del Mar wasn't just underperforming, it was in genuine financial trouble. The property carried significant debt from a poorly executed renovation 3 years prior, and the ownership group was quietly looking for an exit strategy. The asking price was steep, but potentially justifiable if the operational issues could be addressed. I spent weeks preparing a comprehensive acquisition proposal. I analyzed comparable properties, projected renovation costs, mapped out marketing strategies, and created detailed 5-year financial projections. When I finally presented the opportunity to the investment committee at Baker Group, I was confident in my analysis. Their response was unanimous rejection. "Too risky," said Philip, the most conservative of the partners. "The debt structure is problematic, and luxury properties in California have thin margins, even when well managed. The renovation budget you're projecting is optimistic at best, added Diane, our head of development. Based on our experience, you'd need at least 30% more than your estimate. Even William, usually my advocate, had reservations. The numbers could work, Morgan, but the margin for error is virtually non-existent. If anything goes wrong, a bad tourist season, a natural disaster, unexpected structural issues, the whole project could collapse. I left the meeting devastated. For the first time since joining Baker, I felt truly defeated. That night in my condo, I reviewed my proposal again, searching for flaws in my analysis. But the more I examined it, the more convinced I became that Vista del Mar represented a unique opportunity, one that the committee's conventional thinking couldn't appreciate. At 2 a.m, my phone rang. It was William. "Still up?" he asked, though he clearly knew the answer. "Reviewing the Vista del Mar numbers again," I admitted. He chuckled. "I thought you might be. Listen, Morgan, the committee made the right decision for the firm. The risk profile doesn't align with our current investment strategy." "I understand," I said, trying to keep the disappointment from my voice. "But," he continued, "that doesn't mean it's the wrong opportunity for everyone." "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes the best opportunities come when you step outside the institutional framework. Have you considered pursuing this independently?" The question caught me off guard. Independently? "William, the asking price is $35 million. Yes, and you'd need at least another $10 million for renovations and operating capital," he said matter-of-factly. "But real estate at this level isn't typically purchased with a personal check. It's about finding the right investment partners, structuring the right deal." We talked until dawn about private capital, investor consortiums, and alternative financing strategies. By the time we hung up, a plan was beginning to form in my mind, audacious, terrifying, but potentially transformative. As I watched the sunrise from my window, my mother's words echoed in my mind. "This place is beautiful, but clearly above your class, dear. Know your limits." Perhaps it was time to redefine those limits. Pursuing the Vista del Mar acquisition independently meant starting from scratch. I had no institutional backing, no established investment fund, and a personal net worth that, while respectable for a 29-year-old, was laughably inadequate for a $35 million luxury resort purchase. What I did have was intimate knowledge of the property's potential, a detailed business plan, and a determination that bordered on obsession. I also had William's mentorship, though he made it clear he couldn't invest directly due to his fiduciary responsibilities at Baker Group. "What you need," he advised during one of our strategy sessions, "is to find investors who value vision over convention. Institutional investors want safety. You need partners who aren't afraid of calculated risk." Easier said than done. I spent weeks reaching out to contacts throughout my professional network, scheduling meetings with potential investors, and refining my pitch. The responses were consistently discouraging. "The numbers look interesting, but why isn't Baker backing this if it's such a good opportunity?" asked one skeptical real estate investor. "Have you ever actually managed a property of this scale?" questioned another, peering at me over half-moon reading glasses. "This is a big undertaking for someone so junior," said a third, the slight pause conveying his real concern. "Someone so young, so female." After a particularly demoralizing meeting with a potential investor who spent more time looking at my legs than my projections, I hit rock bottom. Sitting alone in a coffee shop, I seriously considered abandoning the whole idea. Perhaps the investment committee had been right. Perhaps this was beyond my capabilities. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe Chen, a friend from business school who now worked in venture capital. "Heard you've been making waves. Drinks tonight? I've got people you should meet." I almost declined, exhausted from weeks of rejection, but something made me accept. That evening, at a rooftop bar in Chelsea, Zoe introduced me to Mason Rivera, Aiden Park, and Layla Khoury, 3 successful tech entrepreneurs who had recently established an investment collective focused on unconventional opportunities with transformative potential, as Mason described it. "Zoe tells us you've got a luxury resort play that traditional investors won't touch," Layla said, getting straight to the point. "Walk us through it." I had given my Vista del Mar pitch so many times by then that I could recite it in my sleep, but something about this audience was different. They asked sharp, insightful questions. They challenged my assumptions without dismissing them. Most importantly, they seemed genuinely excited by the vision I presented. What most investors are missing, I explained, is that Vista del Mar isn't just a hotel, it's an experience with an iconic location and irreplaceable views. The current management is treating it like a commodity, but with the right approach, it could be the most sought-after luxury destination on the Southern California coast. By the end of the evening, they had agreed to review my complete business plan and financial projections. 2 weeks and several intensive due diligence meetings later, they made an offer. They would provide $25 million in capital for a 60% equity stake in the acquisition. It was a major breakthrough, but I was still millions short of what I needed. Traditional lenders were hesitant to finance the remainder given the property's recent performance. I faced a difficult decision: walk away from the deal or find another source of capital. The answer came to me during a restless night. If I truly believed in this opportunity, shouldn't I be willing to bet on myself? The next morning, I listed my condo for sale and began liquidating my personal investment portfolio, the financial security I had built so carefully over the past 7 years. My father was concerned when I told him about my decision. "Princess, are you sure about this? It's a lot to risk on one venture." "I'm sure, Dad," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "Sometimes you have to go all in." He was quiet for a moment. "Your mother doesn't know about this, does she?" "No. And please don't tell her. You know what she'd say." He sighed. "I do. Just promise me you've thought this through." In truth, I had thought of little else for months. I knew the risks were substantial. If Vista del Mar failed, I would lose not just my investment, but my professional credibility. I'd be broke and humiliated, forced to rebuild from nothing. But the alternative, walking away from this opportunity, always wondering what might have been, seemed somehow worse. As the acquisition moved forward, complications multiplied. The due diligence process revealed additional deferred maintenance issues. The sellers attempted to renegotiate terms when they realized how motivated I was. The financing package became increasingly complex as we worked to close the funding gap. The final weeks before closing were a blur of sleepless nights, emergency meetings, and last-minute revisions to the deal structure. At one point, it appeared the entire acquisition might collapse over an environmental assessment that raised questions about cliff stability on a portion of the property. I spent 3 days working with geologists and engineers to verify that the issue was manageable and not the catastrophic deal-breaker the sellers claimed. 48 hours before the scheduled closing, another crisis erupted. One of the minor investors got cold feet and threatened to pull out, which would have created a domino effect that could have unraveled the entire investment consortium. I spent a frantic day restructuring the equity allocations to accommodate the shortfall, ultimately increasing my own stake by committing the last of my personal reserves. On May 15th, exactly 9 months after my mother's dismissive comment during our family vacation, I signed the final purchase documents. Vista del Mar was now majority owned by Ocean View Holdings, the corporate entity I had established for the acquisition. As the largest individual shareholder and managing partner, I effectively controlled the property's future. I stood on the cliff overlooking the Pacific that evening, watching the sunset paint the water gold. The enormity of what I had just done, the risk, the responsibility, the potential hit me all at once. I was now the owner of a $35 million luxury resort that was losing money every month. I had invested every penny I owned and tied my professional reputation to its success or failure. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was just the beginning. The reality of resort ownership hit hard on day one. I arrived early to address the staff, many of whom were understandably anxious about the ownership change. Standing before the assembled team, housekeepers, maintenance workers, front desk agents, restaurant staff, and managers, I saw skepticism in many of their eyes. Who was this young woman, and what did she know about running a luxury resort? "I'm not here to make empty promises," I told them honestly. "Vista del Mar has incredible potential, but realizing that potential will require hard work, creativity, and patience from all of us. Some changes will be necessary, but I'm committed to building on the strengths of this property and the talents of this team. Marco, the long-serving head of maintenance, spoke up first. With all due respect, Miss Reynolds, we've heard similar speeches from the last 3 owners. What makes your vision different? It was a fair question, and I appreciated his directness. Unlike previous owners, I'm not a distant investor looking for quick profits. I've bet everything I have on Vista del Mar, and I'll be here every day, working alongside you to rebuild this resort's reputation. I don't expect blind trust, I intend to earn it. The initial assessment was sobering. Beyond the visible issues I'd identified during due diligence, we discovered serious problems. Outdated electrical systems in the north wing, chronically malfunctioning HVAC units, and a kitchen that violated several health codes. The staff was demoralized after years of cost-cutting and high management turnover. Several key positions were vacant, including executive chef and director of sales. Most alarming was the booking forecast the summer season. Traditionally the property's strongest, showed reservation levels at historic lows. Without a significant uptick in occupancy, we would burn through our operating capital by fall. I moved into one of the smallest rooms at the resort to save on rent and to be on-site 24/7. My days typically started at 5 a.m. with property walks and ended well after midnight reviewing financial reports and responding to guest feedback. I worked alongside housekeeping staff to understand their challenges, shadowed the kitchen during peak service hours, and sat with front desk agents during check-in rushes. Some staff members appreciated my hands-on approach. Others resented it as micromanagement. Sandra, the front office manager, was particularly resistant. With all due respect, she said during one tense meeting, "We don't need someone watching over our shoulders. We need resources and support." "You're absolutely right about needing resources," I acknowledged. "But I can't effectively allocate resources if I don't understand the day-to-day operations. I'm not here to criticize, I'm here to learn." Gradually, a core team of allies emerged, people who shared my vision for what Vista del Mar could become. Marco from maintenance proved invaluable, his 30 years at the property giving him institutional knowledge no consultant could match. Gabriella, a young but talented events coordinator, brought creative energy and local connections. James, the recently hired food and beverage director, had innovative ideas for reimagining the dining experience. Together, we developed a 3-phase renovation and relaunch strategy. Phase 1 would address critical infrastructure and safety issues while making high-visibility improvements to public spaces. Phase 2 would focus on room renovations and amenity upgrades. Phase 3 would enhance the grounds and add new features to reposition the property as a premier luxury destination. We embraced an eco-friendly approach, both from principle and practicality. Sustainable practices would reduce operating costs long-term while appealing to our target demographic. Solar panels were installed on the south-facing roofs. Water-saving fixtures replaced outdated plumbing. The sprawling but thirsty ornamental lawns were reimagined with drought-resistant native landscaping that actually enhanced the coastal aesthetic. To address immediate cash flow concerns, we developed partnerships with local businesses and artists. The previously underutilized beach pavilion became a showcase for local winemakers and craft distillers. We invited area artists to display their works throughout the property, creating a gallery-like experience that refreshed the public spaces while deferring more costly decorative upgrades. Our marketing strategy shifted from traditional advertising to targeted digital campaigns and influencer partnerships. Rather than discounting rooms, which would damage our luxury positioning, we created value-added packages that maintained rate integrity while boosting occupancy. Just as the first phase of renovations neared completion and bookings began to trend upward, disaster struck. An unusually violent spring storm battered the coast, and the newly renovated south wing suffered significant water damage from a failed drainage system. The repairs would cost nearly $1 million money we simply didn't have in the operating budget. The setback couldn't have come at a worse time. Our cash reserves were depleted from the initial renovations, and we were still a month away from the summer season when positive cash flow would resume. I spent 3 days locked in emergency meetings with our investors and lenders, trying to secure additional capital. Mason and Layla remained supportive, but Aiden was losing confidence. "I'm not comfortable throwing good money after bad," he said during a particularly tense video call. "Perhaps we should consider cutting our losses and looking for a buyer." The mere suggestion sent me into a panic. We were so close to turning the corner to sell now would mean losing everything I had invested, both financially and emotionally. I needed time to prove the vision was still viable. I mortgaged the small apartment I had purchased with the remnants of my savings after selling my condo. I negotiated payment terms with contractors. I deferred my own salary. Every available dollar went toward repairing the storm damage and keeping the renovation schedule on track. The pressure was immense. I lost weight, developed insomnia, and found myself second-guessing decisions I would previously have made confidently. During one particularly low moment, I called William. "I might have been wrong about Vista del Mar," I admitted, my voice breaking. "Maybe it was too big a leap." "Are the fundamentals still sound?" he asked calmly. "Yes, but then this is just a moment in time, not the end of the story. Remember why you believed in this property in the first place." His steady confidence helped restore my perspective. The location was still magnificent. The bones of the resort were still good. The team we were building still had exceptional talent. We just needed to weather this storm literally and figuratively. As repairs progressed, an unexpected opportunity emerged. A renowned travel journalist had booked a stay, unaware of our recent challenges. My initial instinct was to find a reason to reschedule her visit, but James, our F&B director, saw it differently. "Let her come," he argued. "We can't control the construction, but we can control the experience. Let's focus on what's working: the new restaurant concept, the local partnerships, the personalized service. If we're transparent about the renovations and exceeding expectations where we can, she might appreciate the authenticity." It was risky, but we decided to embrace it. When the journalist arrived, I personally explained our vision for the property, acknowledged the current limitations, and invited her to experience the elements that represented our future direction. The gamble paid off. Her subsequent article in a major travel publication described Vista del Mar as a diamond in the rough, being thoughtfully polished by passionate new ownership, and praised our commitment to sustainability and local partnerships. She specifically highlighted the refreshingly transparent approach and genuine dedication to creating something special. The article generated a surge of interest in bookings. More importantly, it validated our strategy in the eyes of our investors and lenders, making it easier to secure the additional capital we needed to complete the renovation program. By the end of our first 18 months of operation, Vista del Mar had turned the corner financially. We weren't wildly profitable yet, but we had stabilized the business and established a positive trajectory. Occupancy rates had increased by 40%. Guest satisfaction scores were the highest in the property's recent history. The renovated rooms were earning enthusiastic reviews and commanding premium rates. For the first time since the acquisition, I allowed myself to believe that Vista del Mar would not just survive, but thrive. What had begun as a reaction to my mother's dismissive comment had evolved into something I was genuinely proud of: a distinctive, sustainable luxury experience that reflected my values and vision. The journey was far from over, but the darkest days were behind us. As I watched guests enjoying sunset cocktails on the newly redesigned terrace, I felt a deep sense of vindication, not just against my mother's doubt, but against every person who had underestimated me throughout my career. The next year brought a level of success that exceeded even my optimistic projections. Vista del Mar's reputation grew steadily, fueled by glowing reviews and strategic press coverage. We began to attract a clientele that valued our unique approach to luxury, one that emphasized authenticity, sustainability, and connection to the natural beauty of the California coast. Several Hollywood directors discovered the property and used it as a filming location, bringing valuable exposure and additional revenue. A celebrated chef approached us about creating a signature restaurant concept, highlighting hyper-local ingredients. A luxury lifestyle magazine named our spa renovation one of the most inspiring wellness spaces in North America. The celebrity clientele began to follow. Not the flashy reality TV stars seeking paparazzi attention, but the more discerning actors, musicians, and tech entrepreneurs who valued privacy and substance over scene-making. They appreciated our policy of discretion and the thoughtful touches that differentiated Vista del Mar from cookie-cutter luxury chains. Despite our growing profile, I maintained the hands-on approach that had gotten us through the difficult early days. I still conducted regular property walks, knew most regular guests by name, and kept an office on site rather than managing remotely. My apartment in Los Angeles remained modest, comfortable, but far from ostentatious. Every available dollar went back into improving the resort or building our capital reserves. As Vista del Mar flourished, I tried repeatedly to share my success with my family. I sent my parents photos of the renovations, press clippings about our sustainability initiatives, even an article from a business publication that featured me in a 40 under 40 list of emerging hospitality leaders. My father responded with genuine enthusiasm, calling regularly to ask about new developments and challenges. "I'm so proud of what you've built, Morgan," he told me often. "I always knew you had something special in you." My mother's response was markedly different. She acknowledged the updates with perfunctory politeness but never engaged meaningfully with my achievements. During our infrequent phone calls, she would listen briefly to my news before changing the subject to Audrey's work at the hospital or cousin Patricia's latest legal victory. "Did I tell you Patricia just won a major class action suit?" she asked during one call, interrupting my description of a sustainable renovation award we had received. "The partners are talking about her making named partner before 40. Now that's something." The implied comparison stung as much as ever. In my mother's hierarchy of success, owning and operating a multi-million-dollar luxury resort apparently still ranked below a conventional career in law or medicine. I gradually reduced the frequency of my calls home, protecting myself from the familiar pain of seeking validation that never came. The distance grew during family gatherings as well. At Thanksgiving in Portland, I noticed my mother describing my work to relatives in deliberately diminishing terms. "Morgan manages a hotel in California," she told my great-aunt Helen. "It's on the beach, very pretty. Actually, I own the resort," I corrected gently. "We have a staff of 120. My mother's smile tightened. "Well, yes, technically. With investors, of course. It's not as if you built it yourself." Later that evening, I overheard her speaking to my cousin Bradley, now a mid-level executive at a pharmaceutical company. "It's a shame Morgan never finished her MBA," she said. Though I had never even started an MBA program. "She's doing well enough with this hotel venture. But without the right credentials, there's a ceiling to how far she can go." The misrepresentations and dismissals were so consistent that I began to wonder if they were deliberate, if my success somehow threatened my mother's worldview. By the time Christmas arrived, I had decided to skip the family gathering entirely, citing work commitments. The truth was, I couldn't bear another holiday of having my achievements minimized, while Audrey's conventional career path received endless praise. "You should come home," my father urged, when I called to explain my absence. "Your mother misses you." "Does she?" "Because she barely seems to acknowledge my existence, let alone my work." He sighed heavily. "She's proud of you in her way, Morgan. She just doesn't understand the path you've chosen." "It's been 3 years, Dad. The resort is thriving. What's not to understand?" "You know your mother values security and respectability above all else. In her mind, success means a predictable career with an established institution. What you've done striking out on your own, taking enormous risks, it frightens her. She doesn't have the framework to appreciate it." His explanation made intellectual sense, but did little to ease the emotional hurt. As Vista del Mar continued to flourish, I found myself increasingly disconnected from my family. I focused instead on building relationships with the team at the resort, many of whom had become like a second family, and with the network of entrepreneurs and hospitality professionals who understood and valued what I had accomplished. Yet despite professional fulfillment and financial success, there remained a hollow space where family validation should have been. I had originally pursued the Vista del Mar acquisition partly to prove my mother wrong, to force her to acknowledge my capabilities. Instead, the achievement had somehow widened the gulf between us. During a rare moment of vulnerability, I discussed the situation with Layla during her visit to the property. "Family is complicated," she said, watching the sunset from my office terrace. "I built my first company partly because my father said tech was no place for a woman. When it sold for 8 figures, I thought he'd finally give me the approval I'd been seeking my whole life. Did he? She smiled sadly. He said I got lucky with timing and asked when I was going to settle down and have children. Some people are incapable of giving the validation we seek from them. Her words resonated deeply. Perhaps I needed to accept that my mother would never see my success through the lens I hoped for. Perhaps continuing to seek her approval was a fool's errand that only prolonged my disappointment. Yet, I couldn't quite bring myself to give up entirely. Family was family, however complicated, and somewhere beneath the hurt and frustration remained a daughter's simple wish for her mother's recognition. As Vista del Mar approached its 3rd anniversary under my ownership, an idea began to form a way to bring my family into my world on my terms, to make my success so tangible and undeniable that even my mother would have to acknowledge it. It would be a risk, emotionally if not financially, but perhaps a necessary one to finally resolve the tension that had shadowed my achievements for so long. I would host a family reunion at Vista del Mar, inviting the extended Reynolds clan for a luxury weekend at my resort. But here was the twist. I wouldn't tell them it was my resort, not immediately. Let them experience it first, form their impressions, perhaps even express their admiration, and only then would I reveal that the property they were enjoying was mine. The plan was petty, perhaps, manipulative even, but after years of having my accomplishments diminished and dismissed, I craved the unfiltered reaction that could only come from people who didn't know they were speaking to the owner. I picked up the phone and called my father. "Dad," I said when he answered, "I've been thinking. It's been too long since the whole family got together. How would you feel about a reunion at Vista del Mar?" My treat. Planning the perfect family reunion at Vista del Mar became my obsession over the following weeks. I wanted every detail to showcase the resort at its absolute best, not just for the dramatic revelation I envisioned, but because I was genuinely proud of what we had created and wanted my family to experience it fully. I worked with our events team to create a comprehensive 3-day itinerary that highlighted the property's finest features. Welcome cocktails on the Sunset Terrace, a private dinner in our award-winning restaurant, guided hikes along the coastal trail we had developed, and exclusive access to the newly renovated spa facilities. The invitations I sent were designed to impress thick cream cardstock and envelopes sealed with the resort's distinctive wave logo, promising a weekend of luxury and reconnection, courtesy of Morgan. I deliberately didn't specify my role at the property, allowing my family to assume I had simply arranged a special group rate or package deal. My mother's initial response was predictably hesitant. "Vista del Mar?" she said when I called to follow up on the invitation. "Isn't that rather extravagant? We could do something more sensible in Portland." "It's a special occasion, Mom," I insisted. "The whole family together for the first time in years. Please?" Her resistance softened when I mentioned that Audrey and her husband had already confirmed their attendance. "Well, if Audrey thinks it's appropriate, and you're certain you can afford this?" The question made me smile despite myself. "Yes, Mom. I can afford it." In the weeks leading up to the reunion, I walked a careful line with the staff. I explained that my family would be visiting, but asked that my ownership not be mentioned. I'd like them to experience Vista del Mar as regular guests first, I told the team during our pre-event briefing. I'll explain my role during the weekend. Most understood without further explanation, having witnessed enough of my phone calls with family to recognize the complicated dynamics. Sandra, now our loyal front office director after 3 years of working together, squeezed my hand supportively. "We'll make sure they're impressed before they know why they should be," she promised. The day of their arrival, I deliberately dressed down in the resort's standard management attire rather than my usual business clothes. I waited in the lobby, a flutter of nerves in my stomach that surprised me. After all the guests I had greeted over 3 years of ownership, my family's arrival shouldn't feel so momentous. They came in waves first, my parents' and sister's family, then aunts, uncles, and cousins. I greeted them warmly but professionally, playing the role of resort manager rather than owner. "Welcome to Vista del Mar," I said, handing out welcome packets and explaining the weekend's itinerary. "We're delighted to have the Reynolds family with us." My mother surveyed the recently redesigned lobby with its soaring ceilings, local artwork, and panoramic ocean views. "It's even more beautiful than I remember," she admitted. They've made lovely improvements since our last visit. The new ownership has invested significantly in renovations, I explained, fighting a smile. Let me show you to your suite. I had assigned my parents to our finest accommodation, a corner suite with wraparound views of the Pacific and custom furnishings created by California artisans. My mother's eyes widened as I opened the door, revealing the spacious living area bathed in golden afternoon light. This must be a mistake, she said. We couldn't possibly. No mistake, I assured her. Morgan arranged for upgrades for the immediate family. I left them to settle in, continuing my manager role throughout the welcome reception that evening. It was fascinating to observe my family experiencing Vista Del Mar without the filter of knowing it was mine. They commented freely on the design choices, the quality of service, the exceptional food and wine. The attention to detail is remarkable, my Aunt Linda noted as she admired the hand-blown glass light fixtures in the restaurant. Everything feels special without being pretentious. The staff seemed genuinely happy, my Uncle Robert observed. You don't always see that at luxury properties. My cousin Bradley, always status conscious, made a point of mentioning that he had stayed at all the top resorts in the Hamptons, but found Vista Del Mar surprisingly world-class. The backhanded compliment made me smile. It was exactly the kind of validation I had hoped for, uncolored by family dynamics. Most revealing was overhearing my mother at breakfast the second day, speaking to my Aunt Helen at a table they didn't realize was within my earshot. It really is quite an exclusive place, she said, buttering her toast. Bradley says the nightly rate for these ocean view rooms is well over $1,000. I can't imagine how Morgan is affording this for the entire family. But I must say it's impressive. Perhaps that hotel job of hers pays better than I thought. The weekend progressed smoothly, with each carefully planned experience building upon the last. By the final evening, when we gathered for a private dinner in our wine cellar, the consensus was clear. Vista Del Mar had exceeded everyone's expectations, and my stock had risen accordingly for having arranged such a luxurious gathering. I had planned the revelation carefully. After the main course, our events director Gabriela would announce a special presentation about the resort's history and renovation, ostensibly as a customary feature for group dinners. The presentation would begin with beautiful imagery of the property's transformation, before revealing my role as owner and visionary. As Gabriela dimmed the lights and the first slides appeared on the screen, I felt a curious mix of emotions, anticipation, certainly, but also an unexpected sadness. Would this revelation finally bring the recognition I had sought for so long? And if it did, would it feel as satisfying as I had imagined? The presentation beautifully captured Vista Del Mar's journey from faded glory to renewed splendor. It showed before and after images of renovated spaces, highlighted our sustainability initiatives, and featured testimonials from delighted guests. My family watched with interest, unaware of the revelation to come. The transformation you've witnessed was led by a visionary owner who saw potential where others saw only problems, Gabriela narrated as the slides progressed. Someone who believed this iconic property deserved to be restored and reimagined for a new generation. The screen transitioned to a photo of me on opening day after our major renovation, champagne in hand, surrounded by the core team who had made it all possible. A collective gasp rose from the table as recognition dawned. Please join me in welcoming the owner and managing partner of Vista Del Mar Resort, your very own Morgan Reynolds. I stood as the lights came up, meeting the stunned gazes of my family members. Their expressions ranged from confusion to disbelief to, in my father's case, unmistakable pride. Surprise, I said simply. The room erupted in questions and exclamations. My cousins wanted to know how long I had owned the resort, how I had acquired it, whether the celebrity sightings they had heard about were real. My aunts and uncles expressed amazement that little Morgan had built something so impressive. My father wiped away tears as he embraced me. Only my mother remained silent, her expression unreadable. When the initial commotion subsided, she finally spoke. You've owned Vista Del Mar for 3 years? This entire time? I nodded. Since that family vacation when you told me this place was above my class, a flash of recognition crossed her face, followed by something that might have been embarrassment. I said that, didn't I? You did. It wasn't the first time you suggested I should know my limits. The table fell awkwardly silent. My revelation had been planned as a moment of triumph, not confrontation, but years of suppressed hurt had risen unexpectedly to the surface. My mother set down her wine glass carefully. Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately. We excused ourselves and walked to the terrace overlooking the moonlit ocean. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, my mother broke the silence. I never intended to hurt you, Morgan. I only wanted to protect you from disappointment by telling me what I couldn't achieve. How does that protect anyone? She sighed, looking out at the dark water. You have to understand where I came from. My father worked in a factory his entire life. My mother cleaned houses. When they reached for anything beyond their station, they were slapped down hard. I watched them build hopes and dreams, only to have them crushed by reality. It was more personal history than she had ever shared with me. So you decided to preemptively crush my dreams instead? I thought I was teaching you to be realistic, to set achievable goals. The world can be cruel to those who overreach. She gestured toward the resort around us. Clearly, I misjudged what was achievable for you. The admission, however qualified, was more than I had ever received from her. Why couldn't you just support me? Why was it so hard to believe I might succeed? Because failure hurt too much. Her voice caught unexpectedly. Every time my parents tried and failed to improve our circumstances, a little piece of their spirit died. I couldn't bear to watch that happen to you. In that moment, I glimpsed the frightened girl beneath my mother's controlling exterior, a child who had learned that safety lay in limited expectations, that the pain of disappointment was worse than the constraints of a small life. But look what happens when you try and succeed, I said gently. Look what becomes possible. She turned to face the resort, the beautiful spaces, the happy guests, the vision realized. Yes, she said quietly. I see that now. It wasn't the dramatic validation. I had imagined no tearful apology or effusive praise. But in my mother's subdued acknowledgement, I sensed the beginning of a shift. Not an overnight transformation, but a crack in the armor of her limiting beliefs. We rejoined the family dinner. The tension between us eased, if not entirely resolved. The evening concluded with toasts and congratulations. My achievement no longer hidden, but celebrated openly. In the weeks following the reunion, my relationship with my mother entered new territory. Our conversations became more frequent and surprisingly candid. She asked questions about the business that revealed genuine interest rather than skepticism. When I mentioned challenges, she offered encouragement instead of warnings about inevitable failure. One day, a package arrived at my office, a framed article about Vista del Mar from a prestigious travel magazine, along with a note in my mother's precise handwriting. For your office wall. I should have recognized your potential sooner. I'm learning. Love. Mom. It wasn't everything. Years of complex dynamics couldn't be resolved with a single gesture, but it was a beginning, an acknowledgement that perhaps her vision of my capabilities had been too limited, that the boundaries she had tried to enforce were more about her fears than my potential. As for Vista del Mar, it continued to thrive under my leadership. The resort that was once above my class had become the vehicle not just for financial success, but for personal growth and even family healing. I had pursued the acquisition partly out of spite, driven by a desire to prove my mother wrong. But along the way, something more meaningful had emerged, a genuine passion for creating experiences that delighted guests, a commitment to sustainable luxury, and a community of colleagues who had become a second family. My journey with Vista del Mar taught me that true success isn't measured by others' validation, not even from those whose approval we most crave. It comes from building something authentic, something that reflects our values and vision. And sometimes, in the process of proving ourselves right, we create something meaningful that transcends the need to prove others wrong. So if you've ever been told something was above your class or beyond your capabilities, remember my story. Know your worth, trust your instincts, and don't let anyone else define your limits. The most satisfying revenge isn't proving critics wrong, it's proving yourself right. Now I'd love to hear from you. Has someone ever underestimated you? And how did you respond? Did you walk away? Or did you use it as motivation? Drop a comment below. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this story. and share it with someone who might need a reminder that other people's perceptions don't define our potential. Thanks for watching. And remember, the best view comes after the hardest climb.